In this video, I will share a recent game that I played using the Pegasus system opening, which starts with d4, and then on the next move we play knight to d2. And in this video, I will explain a little bit how this opening works, but the biggest focus is the middle game and the attack that I was able to set up here. To really benefit from this video, you should watch it from the beginning until the end and try to guess my moves before I make them and think along with the game. So the game starts here with the Pegasus system opening, which is my favorite opening to play with white. Just d4, knight to d2, and this already confuses the opponent. This gets them out of their theory, and for me this is something that I always play. All right, so in the game this is how it went. The main plan with this opening is that we want to play pawn to e4 eventually. Basically, whenever we can play it without losing anything, we should play it. Right here, that's not possible because black played this combination of moves, being the knight and the pawn together to stop us from pushing that. Whenever they prevent you from playing e4, the plan is always to play e3 and then to switch into this strategy, which is to counterattack in the center with the move c4. This is a very, very typical structure that we set up as white here in this opening. My opponent plays pawn to c6, which is actually, even though it gives it a thumbs up, not one of the best moves, because one of the best counterattacks for black is to play the eventual pawn to c5, trying to counterattack in the center. And by playing c6, they are making it very clear that they will not go for this counterattack anytime soon, or they will have to move that pawn twice. All right. And in this Pegasus system opening, there are basically always two middle game plans, and you just have to pick between those two middle game plans. One of the plans is to just simply develop and eventually try to play b3 and do a fianchetto with your bishop. The other plan is to play queen to b3 and attack b7. The way that you can remember which plan to go for is basically to just look at this light squared bishop. This light squared bishop is currently protecting that pawn, so there is no point in us attacking that with the queen because it's protected. So that means that here we will just be going for normal development. So knight f3. My opponent plays knight d7, and I play bishop d3. Very normal, very sensible moves. All of these moves also because I still want to prepare the eventual pawn push to e4. There are many moves that you can play to support that push. Moves like bishop d3, queen c2 or queen e2, castle, and then also get the rook to the e file. So this is a very simple strategy you can follow. We just need to prepare that e4 push. And here my opponent surprised me a little bit. They took the pawn on c4, and this is not that common, especially at higher level chess, 2000 plus elo opponents. They usually don't do this anymore. I guess my opponent played this move because very often against these setups by white, this is a good move because you can try to force that bishop to move twice by capturing it. But in the Pegasus system, we don't have to capture that with our bishop. We can capture that with our knight. And this was actually one of the main reasons why we put that knight on d2 in the beginning, because we can protect c4 and we can protect e4. Both of these squares are very important. So here you can already see how just because I am using a bit of an unusual opening, my opponent is already going clearly wrong. They are basically just playing on autopilot here. Then the opponent follows up with b5, which is a very normal move in this position. You play this all the time when the bishop is on c4. Against the knight on c4, this is a little bit different. These two knights always combine very well, and eventually this knight can go to e5, where it is supported by the knight on f3. And this already comes with a threat. This comes with a threat of capturing that pawn on c6. So basically black needs to deal with this. They could play something like bishop b7 to protect that pawn. But this shows here why this is such a good opening, because my opponent, being a 2030 rated player, just plays on autopilot. They don't think, because this looks very similar to things that they have seen, but the Pegasus system is different enough that it creates new problems for them. And of course, this just leads into us winning the pawn on c6. And this mostly proves the point that I try to make in every single video that I create, where I always say, you don't have to defeat your opponent. Your opponent will eventually self-destruct. That's just the case. Up to, I would say, even 2100, 2200 ELO, they almost always give away something, which is also the case here. However, it's only a pawn. This game was really all about converting this slight advantage, or only a one pawn advantage, into a win. And that's going to be the most important lesson from this game. So black plays queen b6, and this attacks the knight. The knight has to either move or we need to protect it. In general, I am a big fan of moving it, because if you protect it, you are putting your pieces in a very defensive setup, and probably they will just keep attacking it. But we can just go back to e5, and black takes with the bishop. And I think this is the first moment where I made a small mistake in my play. So this is something that you can learn from. How should we capture this back? With the knight or with the pawn? You can make a guess. What do you think is the best move? In the game, I ended up taking it with the knight, which is actually not the best thing to do. The best thing is to take it with the pawn. The reason why is, if you take it with the pawn, we get that pawn to e5, and it is already protected once by the knight. If we take with the knight first, which is what I played, we end up getting even more exchanges. The pawn also gets to e5, but now this pawn is completely unprotected, and it's also not so easy to add defenders to this pawn. The only real move would be to play pawn to f4, which could maybe work, but it also messes up the pawn structure a little bit. So here is an improvement would have been to take with the pawn immediately. My opponent played knight d5, which I found was a bit confusing. I thought they were going to go knight d7 and at least try to attack the pawn, but they didn't. Okay. So here we have a position where we are already up a pawn, but it's not because we are up a pawn that we are already winning the game. We still have to be very careful and try to convert this into a win. And this extra pawn that we have, we could also lose it at any point, which is something that we also need to watch out for. So in this position, I was wondering, what should I do here? How can we make progress? And I noticed something here, which is very common in this position, which is that eventually, as white, we will have a huge attack towards the king side. And why do I notice this? Whenever you get that pawn on e5, that means their most important defensive piece, this knight, is gone, which makes this h7 pawn weak. We could potentially set up an attack there, maybe get the queen involved. If at some point we play e4, we can also get the bishop involved. So I saw here that we have this very typical plan of just bringing everything over to the king side, which is also what is eventually going to happen in this game. All right, I castled first just to be safe, and then my opponent played bishop to b7, which is not a bad move. And here I played the move queen to e2. Queen to e2 is a bit of a standard maneuver in these positions. It slightly improves the queen. The queen now has two diagonals. The bishop is supported, and we can just continue the game from here. There are many other moves that are also great here. I was a bit surprised after this game that when I was analyzing it with the engine says the move e4 is so incredibly strong for white. I looked at this move nearly every single time that it was my turn. But I always thought that when you play e4, you are also blocking in your bishop, which it's something that you can do, but you have to do it at the right moment, because if you do it too early, you might be hindering some of your own pieces. But apparently it's already perfectly fine to play that move here. All right. So we have this position, and in this position I played a3 just to take away that square from the knight, because all this time I was keeping an eye open for what potential counterplay my opponent might have, and I didn't want them to have any counterplay. Still, the move e4 also works. It's still a good move here. All right, and black is being very sneaky here with this move. This is why it's always important to double check, triple check even what the opponent is doing. They are setting up a checkmate. And it's very simple for white to go wrong. If we make a move and we don't pay attention, suddenly this knight will go somewhere. Maybe it will even take this pawn, and we would be in trouble. If it takes the pawn, however, we would be able to capture back with the pawn and protect sideways. I will show you a variation that didn't happen in the game. For example, we go here, which you can immediately see this is a blunder. This didn't happen in the game. This move probably would be better for them. Attack the queen, attack the bishop, attack the g2 pawn, and there is an incoming checkmate as well. And the only thing that we can do is drop the bishop in favor of stopping the checkmate, something like this happen. So that would probably be how they can be tricky. So I calculated, I actually didn't calculate the exact way that they would be able to trick me, but I just saw that there will be tricks here in the future. And whenever you see your opponent lining up something like this, the best thing you can do is just immediately get rid of it, because there is a very high likelihood, if you don't, that you will at some point miscalculate or forget that this is even a threat in the game. So that is why here at this moment, yes, I did immediately play pawn to e4. It blocks this diagonal from their pieces. It also blocks in my own bishop a bit, but it's still fine. And from here, we can just continue. And this moment is, I think, one of the most important moments in the game here, the moment where I played f4, because I was looking at this position thinking, okay, we have one extra pawn, and that's about it. And that pawn is also a doubled pawn. So if we don't really do anything and we just go along and we start trading pieces and we don't really do anything, then eventually we are just going to have an endgame with one extra pawn, which is a doubled pawn. And those endgames, especially against 2000 elo and higher opponents, are very drawish because they can try to hold on and secure a draw in those endgames. Then I was also thinking, what is the other potential plan I could go for here? And then I realized that we are already very deep into the game, but my opponent still hasn't castled. And that's usually one of the signs that you should see if there is a way to attack them, if they still haven't castled. Also, I wanted to undouble my pawns potentially, which is why I started with the move f4, seeing if we can start a huge attack here on the enemy king. And here I think I was a little bit too quick with the attack. I immediately played pawn f5 because I already saw a lot of potential attacks, sacrifices, brilliant moves. I saw all of it coming, so I immediately went for this, which actually drops a pawn. So if you want, you can always see if you can find it. My opponent didn't find it, but there is the move queen c5, which gives a check, and it also picks up the pawn. However, even if they do this, they are still in trouble. I will show you this. This didn't happen in the game, but I want to show you this because it's important. They give a check. We could block with the queen or we could block with the rook. I think both of these would be possible. And they can take here. But for example, here, if they take this pawn, this would actually be a trap because the queen would be trapped eventually. Bishop to f4, attacking the queen. The queen is just completely running out of squares here. The queen has no squares. The only square it can go to is f6. And then after e5, the queen is trapped. And I could say that I saw all of this coming and that this was a genius trap, but it was actually an accident. I gave them this free pawn on accident, but the clue is that they cannot take it, because if they do, they lose the queen. But just to show, you have to be careful and double check everything. But the thing that happened, maybe my opponent did see everything and they saw that the queen would be trapped. I don't know. I didn't ask them. Could be the case. So the thing that I really wanted happened. The pawns are undoubled. And this is how you can turn a small advantage, like an extra pawn, into a winning position. We go from having an extra pawn that's doubled to having an extra pawn that's just a very good, aggressively placed attacking pawn here. So that's already a huge advantage. Plus, we are opening up this again. The only thing that we do have to be very careful with here is that by removing that pawn, this checkmate is live again, which suddenly means that so many of our pieces are tied together. And my opponent is a very good player here, very tricky player. He is already trying to set up some type of trap. I'll just show you something that didn't happen in the game, but that could have happened. Let's say we just make any regular move. We would lose the game instantly. Because of rook takes d3, and my queen is babysitting the bishop, while also looking at this pawn on g2. And the queen cannot really do two things at the same time. If we take that rook, that would be a very devastating checkmate in one. This didn't happen because I was very aware this entire game of this threat. And whenever you have a threat like this, you don't want to keep this on the board for too long. There are many moves that we could make, but if we keep this on the board for too long, eventually we will miscalculate, we will blunder, and the game will be over, which is why I played the very simple move rook to f2. The rook is stopping this. It might seem like it was not even necessary because now we have two pieces doing this job. But this is really necessary because now the queen is free and this queen is important for the attack. All right, and my opponent then started this new plan, which is to double up rooks and see if they can put some pressure. And from here, white really has a completely winning attack. As I said in the beginning, this is very common with this opening. We have the two bishops, we have the queen, and we have two possible pawn moves that we could make to open up the position. So if you want, especially from here, really think long, try to guess the moves. I started with the move bishop g5, which, looking back at it, maybe was not necessary. It's the best move, but you could also play pawn to f6. I never played pawn to f6 this early because I always thought pawn to f6 looks like such a great move, but we also give that knight the g6 square to go to. And I didn't really want that. So my plan was, let's use one of my useless pieces that really hasn't done anything so far and see if we can eliminate that knight. My opponent is trying to set up a counterattack here, attacking this bishop. And here there is a very nice win for white, which starts with the move pawn to f6, which I didn't play in the game. Pawn to f6 would probably even be a brilliant move, I think. If they take here, there is pawn takes e7, and yeah, we are almost promoting. This rook is hanging. They are under so much pressure. So this would be a very good move. I looked at this move, but I decided that I first wanted to trade. I got rid of that knight and then play pawn to f6 with similar plans. And this is really, I think, the most crucial position in the entire game. So it is white to play here, and you have to try to find the next move. We played f6, and black just took on f6. What do we do? Well, first of all, we cannot capture this with the pawn, because if we do, we would lose the queen. Okay, and the most sensible looking move is rook takes f6. And rook takes f6 would actually completely throw away the game here. I already calculated this beforehand, but this would be devastating. So I didn't play this in the game, but this could have happened. Rook to f6. The reason that this throws away the advantage is because suddenly there is something like queen c5 with a check. This king is in some trouble. Let's say that we move to the corner square. We lose the pawn. And this black king is actually way more safe than it looks, and we don't really have any attack. The check also doesn't work because they can block. So this didn't happen in the game, but this would have been a mistake. Instead, there is a winning move here for white. Queen to g4 with a check, forcing the king to move, and then pawn takes f6. And this is a very typical attacking pattern to remember, where you force the king on the back rank. You have this, which is called a pawn wedge. It's a pawn that's on the 6th rank, and they say that this pawn is just as strong as a knight or a bishop as soon as the pawn gets on the 6th rank when you are attacking. So that rook is under attack. They have to move the rook, and now from here there is a very simple win, which is queen to g7, queen to g8, queen takes f7, and this king is on the run. I thought that they were going to go to c8, and then I would play bishop to f5 to pin that rook. Instead, my opponent tried to make it confusing and go king here, but this is clearly winning for white. We can still play bishop to f5. The only thing is that I think at this point I really didn't have that much time left. So I had to be very careful with my moves, but there is a very easy win, which is just take the rook. That's a free rook. There is even a free bishop here, but as I said, my time was very low, so I was mostly looking for checks. We have a check, and then I just gave another check. Maybe not the best thing, but I was always careful that I didn't want to suddenly end up in back rank trouble either. Some checks, and then eventually we can take the queen. And then from there, this is a very easy game to convert. You basically make a second queen, you trade, you attack, and then eventually there is a checkmate. So let me know if you find this type of video helpful. It is something new that I am trying out. And definitely give this opening a try. Try to play the Pegasus system and let me know how it went.